Thank you very much. It really is just delightful to be here, and I'm so pleased to see so many people. I have to tell you, Stacy, that when I got this call, Martha and Alexa reached out and said, would you be willing to come and do this? And said, we're going to have a dinner. And my first thought was, okay, we're going to have dinner. And they said, it's for Dave Grossman, and we're putting together a foundation so that we will be able to carry on his work. And I had exactly one answer immediately, and that is, I'm in. I'm in because I remember Dave too. And I'm in because his work must go on. So Dave and I cross paths at different times through legal services because I teach a lot about people who go broke. And a lot of bad things happen to them, and so we'd sometimes see intersections over in legal services. I try to help out from time to time. But he's the one who was running it, who was inspiring, who was keeping the students going. But I wanted to talk tonight. I was just trying to think about this and trying to think, because our big intersection came, no surprise, in 2008, 2009. That's when we really started connecting up on the work. And it's to talk for just a minute about what's happened in America, why it is that Dave Grossman had to do the work that he was called to do. And I want to see if I can tell a long story really quickly, so I won't do it Socratically. But here's the basic story. We built this country. We thought we had a great idea, but it was a boom and bust country. That's what it was from the 1790s all the way to 1930. And what would happen is roughly about every 15 years, we'd get it going, it would move up, people would have more jobs, there'd be more going on in the economy, and it would blow up, and the whole thing would crash. And yeah, the speculators would go down, and owners of good-sized businesses would go down, but so did the employees. And so did the farmers, and so did the little shopkeepers, so did everyone else. They lost their farms, they lost their homes, and then what would happen? They'd start the process all over again with a lot of hurt left behind. Then we hit the big one in 1930, so big it got its own name, the Great Depression. And here's the amazing thing. We said at the moment of the Great Depression, we can do better than this. As a country, we can build something better than this. We do not have to do this every 15 years. We do not have to be boom and bust. And so we did two fundamental things. The first one is we said we can actually regulate finance better. What's going on with finance? And you know what? We did it. So we made it safe to put money in banks, FDIC insurance. We separated ordinary banking, safe banking, from crazy risk-taking, that was Glass-Steagall. And we put a cop on the beat on Wall Street, that was the SEC. And the second thing we did three things. And actually, let me stop there. We did three things. Do you know what happened? We bought ourselves economic peace. There were some recessions, there's some movement, but no big crash, right? No big crash. We bought it. And then what did we do with the peace we bought? We invested in building opportunity for all of us. We invested heavily in education, GI Bill, NDEA loans, federal aid to education. We doubled down and doubled down again because we believed that if more of our kids could get a good education, then they would have more opportunities. They could build more, they could do more. We invested in infrastructure, in roads and bridges and power and clean water. Why? Because we didn't know who was going to build the next great business, but we were pretty darn sure they were going to need electricity. We were pretty darn sure they were going to need roads to be able to get their goods to market. And so we all invested in those things, so whoever had the great idea would have a chance to grow it and grow jobs for the rest of us. We all pitched in to help make that happen. And we did a third thing, because we were a truly remarkable people. We invested in research, in ideas. We invested in scientific research and medical research and engineering research and social science research over this long period. We invested because we believed that if we built a giant pipeline of ideas, that our kids would be able to do things we hadn't even dreamed of yet. Now, here's the thing. We put those regulations in place, we made those investments, and it worked. It absolutely worked. You look at the numbers, and from 1935 to 1980, GDP just keeps this upward climb. And what happens to all that new income that's generated? The 90% of America, everybody outside the top 10%, everybody outside the top 10%, got 70% of all the new income that was generated. We built opportunity in this country, and we lifted people. We weren't perfect. Boy, there were lots of people who got shut out who didn't have the same opportunities. African Americans, Latinos, women for a long time, LGBT, lots of folks got pushed out, but we were bending it in the right direction. I'll give you just one stat on that. 1960s and 1970s, the black-white wealth gap that has been there as long as we have been able to measure a wealth gap was actually cut by 70%. We were putting ourselves on the right track. We weren't there yet, but we were on the right track. And then 1980 is kind of a good mark point here. We turned this country in a different direction. Ronald Reagan gets elected. Business is now on the rise, and the whole notion changes from one of let's keep the regulations in place and let's invest in all of us to an America that, I'm just going to be blunt, is about how to help the rich and powerful get richer and more powerful. That's what happened. And I'll do it both ways, on the rich and the powerful. Rich was about cutting taxes. And once you cut taxes, there's no money left, and that's exactly what's happened. There's no money for education. We've made deep cuts in our support for education. That's why it is that we now have a $1.3 trillion student loan bill, because we've made those cuts and driven up the cost of college and forced those costs onto our kids. We have made cuts in infrastructure. The American Society for Civil Engineers now says that we get a D+ rating. Bridges fall down. Larry Summers actually does the calculation on this in terms of what you should be doing with maintenance. He now says basically in America, we are investing zero in infrastructure. The dollars we're spending do not even keep our infrastructure safe and up to date, and we are not building anything new. And the third part, research, the way you build that great pipeline of ideas, we've cut it by 40% as a proportion of our GDP since the 1960s. That's the direction that we have gone in. And the other part, need I speak about the regulatory part of this? What's happened on that front? We repealed Glass-Steagall. We pulled regulatory thread after regulatory thread out of the basic structure. We turned around and said, in effect, that the bank regulators are here to serve the industry, not to watch out for American consumers. And what was the consequence of all of this? It was the crash of 2008. A crash that we estimate today, no one is sure entirely, but that cost this country $14 trillion and cost upwards of 8 million people their homes. Their single most valuable asset, if you just want to do this on dollars, but the part that was the stability, the part where you raised your kids, the part where you knew you were safe, we just wiped it out, took it away. We made this country work for those at the top. And by the way, let me be clear, it still worked. Remember how I told you from 1935 to 1980, GDP had done this, and that the 90% got 70% of all new income growth in that time? From 1980 to 2016, GDP stays on basically the same upward trajectory. There's a little bump, obviously. In 2008, it comes down. It's a little uneven, but it goes up. So what happened to the 90% from 1980 to 2016. How much of the growth in income did they get in that time period? The answer is effectively zero. 0.6%. That's it. 100% of growth in income, not just in the last 2 years, not just since the crash, since 1980 has gone to those at the top. We have a country that works great if you're in the top 10%. It's not about the 1%, it's really the top 10%. It's working great for the top 10%. And opportunity for everyone else is shrinking, is being cut off. And that's what brings us to today and why we're here for the Dave Grossman Fund. We find our best ways to fight back. For me, when Dave really jumped on my radar screen is when I was teaching my commercial law class in the spring of '09. We've just had the crash in '08 in the fall. I've had my bankruptcy students. And I'm in the middle of trying to teach basically how mortgage works, because that's what you have to do in secured transactions, how you take property back even though it's not actually the real estate course. And I have about 4 guys sitting in the back row in my class who did not look like they'd been paying close attention until they came down with a whole list of very specific questions that were not actually what we've been talking about. So in a foreclosure, a judicial foreclosure state, how exactly does that work? And I'm saying, wait, we don't talk about that in this class. And they're like, well, okay, but how does it work? And talk a little bit more. And then they said, have you heard of No One Leaves? And I said, no. And they said, well, here's what it is. And they told me about what Dave was working on, told me about what they had built together. And here was their ask. Could they stand up in class and see if anyone else wanted to join them? And I said, you bet, find out. And they stood up in class, described what they were trying to do. And remember at this moment, the foreclosures are just starting, right? The whole thing is just starting. It's like the ground is crumbling everywhere. And they explained that they want to start out by walking the neighborhoods, passing out flyers, saying you don't have to go. There is help. There are ways that you can stay, and we want to help you. We want to be part of that. And we want to help you find the ways to make this work. I said, is anyone in here want to join us? And that was my commercial law class for the spring of 2009. And that's what Dave does. Now, that's what I admired most about Dave, is that he saw a problem and he did his best to fix it. He used the tools that he had available to him. Heck, let's face it, he made up a few tools. Those are the best kind, right? Until you get them out there and you make it happen. But here's where we are today. We don't have Dave with us. And we still haven't fixed this problem. Yeah, foreclosures have slowed down because so many people have already lost their homes. Foreclosures are not happening nearly as much because BlackRock now owns their homes. And this is the part that makes me so furious, and why the minute the question came, would you come here and talk tonight, is to say, I just want you to understand today, after all that we have seen, after all that we have watched, as these financial institutions loaded up on risk, as the regulators looked the other way, as the federal government made itself the tool of those who had already made it big, all of that has happened, where are we today? Well, all of those houses that had been owned by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA houses that ultimately, through a very long and slow process, end up at HUD. Some of them still have families in them, some of them don't. Some of them have been in foreclosure literally 6 and 7 and 8 years, some a much shorter period of time. What's happening? HUD's now selling those houses. They're packaging them up and selling them back. They're saying, get them off the government's books. It's time to put them back into the hands of communities, owners, somebody else. Not our problem, says HUD. So how do they put the packages together? They put the packages together in a way that was perfectly designed for hedge funds to come in and buy them. And those have been the principal buyers of these packages of loans. And I just want to point out on this, the example. You put together a package of bad mortgages that are all right here in Boston or right in Worcester, someplace close that are contiguous, you can get a group that can invest in that. You can get local people who'll be able to put it together, who'll be able to run it, who'll be able to work with the homeowners who are here, who'll be able to work with the cities, find ways to take those homes, to make them affordable housing if they no longer have the homeowner in them, or to keep a homeowner in them. You can put restrictions on how you sell them. But how did HUD sell them? They put them into giant packages. And there are a few from Boston, and there's some from Springfield, and then there are a whole bunch from California, and then a bigger bunch from Nevada, and a few from down in Florida, and then a couple more from Texas. Who do you think bids on a package like that? And the answer is, it's BlackRock. It's Goldman. It's the hedge funds. It's the guys in New York who, they look at it and they just say, this is a business opportunity. We're going to buy this stuff up, and we're going to get rid of the families who are in them, and then we're going to turn around. And if we can sell them, that's fine, but mostly want to turn it into rental property and see how much we can squeeze out of this. I tell you this because this is something that would make Dave Grossman furious, and it would make him fight back. So I figured I'd get a chance to come here tonight with people who understand why we get furious, and people who will say, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to make a difference. I come here tonight because I am an optimist. I come here tonight because I believe that optimists see what is wrong, figure out a path to fix it, and then just do their damnedest to get out there and make the changes we need to make. And I think that's the best way we honor Dave Grossman, and that's why I wanted to be here. So that's it. That's it for me.